Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Holy Happy Hour. I'm your host, Josh, and if you guys haven't been to the channel before, welcome. We are here, and we are kind of combining two of some of my favorite things: a holy hour, which is a great time of just something. Obviously, sometimes it's done in front of the Eucharist and prayer, but sometimes it's done over a drink with a friend, and also a happy hour where we have a drink with a friend, and, celebrate good times and good conversations. Today's drink is brought to you by Lint. It's water. So we are
I just
joined
had some
today.
black coffee, so we're good. We're on the same
There you
page.
go. I know, right? That's what I actually just thought to myself. Like, you know what? I'm gonna like film the intro video and everything. It's gonna be me making a cocktail. We're gonna have a drink, and my wife's like, Lent's starting soon. I'm like, dang. Okay, we'll wait until after Lent for that. So that's awesome. But to introduce my guest here, this is Cameron Riker. Riker, am I saying that right?
That's 100% right. Yes,
Awesome.
that's
I
correct.
assume so, but you never know. My last name's Bunderberg, and when I say it, people are like, "What is that?" But if you see it spelled out, it's like, "Oh, that's super easy." But well,
Okay.
welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. How's the Lent going, and how's everything with the family?
Lent is good. We have still a under 1 year old, and
Oh
so
yeah,
we're getting lots of bonus penance.
yeah. Oh, I know,
I
man.
don't know if he's teething or what, but it's been a rough month, rough couple weeks at least for him sleeping. So lots of
Yeah,
sanctification happening over here.
it is that time. I feel like people say that like your vocation is what helps you get to heaven, and it's a,
Hmm.
a way to get to heaven. And I feel like it's like a way to sacrifice, and that's how you get to. It's like I don't know that saying always was like, oh yeah, I'm so looking forward to marriage because marrying Lindsay and having kids, that's gonna be my path to heaven. But it's like I didn't think about like, well, it's your path to heaven because you're gonna go through all these trials and it's gonna be tough. And it's been it's been weird. I remember when we had our first, and we had a little like our under one age, we had our very first. It was just I was like, Lent's coming up. Do I need to sacrifice any? I don't know if I need to fast from anything. I feel like I'm fasting from sleep already. I'm yeah, it was great, but
That's so
that's
true.
awesome.
I've been doing a little easier Lent than I usually do this year.
Hmm.
I've done
Yeah,
Exodus 90. I've done some pretty crazy things in the past. This year, I took it down a notch because I'm just not sleeping very well, and I
yeah,
want to make sure that my penance isn't everyone else's penance. I
yeah,
still want to be
yeah, absolutely.
enjoyable to be around and charitable and patient. So that's the
Yeah.
strategy I've taken. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I work at a university parish, and I've seen that with like you see some of the students want to like give up this and this and this, and I'm going to add this and this and this, and you're like, are you like you need to make sure what you're doing is going to be realistic. I was a personal trainer for a long time. We talked smart goals, like specific. Let's see if I can still do this. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And I was like, that is so good for Lent too. Like we don't want to just completely become like give up everything and add everything to where yeah you just become a monster for everybody else. You're not being
Yeah.
fruitful for your community.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's good you have to find that balance. You don't want to do too soft on yourself and you don't
Yeah.
even really notice it's Lent. And then you also don't
Hmm.
want to get to a point where you are just so insufferably hungry that you are a tyrant or
Yeah.
something like that. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
really just a matter of prudence and finding that line. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found that with Lent, in the last few years, like so growing up, I always had like a TV. There was a TV in every single room, like the living room, the kitchen, like all of our bedrooms. Like we had a family room had a TV in it, like every single room. And so TV became such a big part of our lives. And I became Catholic 6 years ago, so I'm still a baby Catholic. I was saying for anyone watching, I was saying right before we recorded, I said I'm kind of like George Janko says all the time. I'm a baby Christian. I'm still learning. I'm like I feel like that's me too. Like baby Catholic, still learning. But I was grew up with a TV in every single room, and it became such a big part of my life. Like when me and my now wife were first dating, we would walk into the apartment to like even just grab food real fast, and we'd be there for like 45 minutes. But I'd get there and I'd grab the remote, turn on the TV, and then walk into the kitchen to make food. And she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "This is a problem." So that was the easy one. I was like, "I need to give this up for Lent," like early on. And then later it was like social media. I found myself I was scrolling on social media, really easy. Have you found like times in your life where it's Lent's like that? Like I know exactly what I need to give up, versus like now I'm like I don't really know what that is. Like I don't know what's controlling my life the most. So I actually focus more on adding to make everything a little bit more. I don't know, my life a little tougher, if that makes sense. Have you seen that in your life too?
Yeah, so the principal thing that you need to fast from in Lent is always sin. And so
Hmm.
it's important to figure out what is your predominant vice. That's what it's called
Hmm.
by the theologians. Your predominant vice is basically the weakest link in your chain. So
Hmm.
whenever you are engaging in spiritual warfare, the devil's not very original. He's going to find where
Hmm.
the kink is in your armor and then
Hmm.
keep poking you right there over and over and over again. So if somebody
Yeah.
feels like they're just constantly tempted to lust, well, that's because that's the weak point in your armor. And the demons work
Hmm.
for God and they essentially serve two purposes. One is that they will be smoke alarms and they tell you exactly where your weak point is, right? If you're
Hmm.
constantly being tempted to lust, it's because that's where your weak point is. And the
Yeah.
second thing they do is they give us multiple occasions, many occasions where we have opportunities to fight battles against lust and thereby grow in the virtue of chastity. So
Hmm.
if you want to have a good Lent, you should figure out where are most of your temptations coming from. Is it impatience with your
Hmm.
kids? Is it overeating at the dinner table, gluttony? Is it sins of lust or custody of the eyes? Figure out where your predominant fault is and then implement some penance that's going to amend that at least in part. Then you'll have
Hmm.
the best Lent of your life. And then on top of that, the
Yeah.
extra prayers and things like that, 100%. But God offers us so much grace during the season of Lent to be able to please Him. You know, it's sometimes people think, oh, it's Lent. I'm going to offer this sacrifice to God. When in
Hmm.
actuality, if you look at it from a bit of a deeper theological perspective, your penances during Lent are God's gift to you, not the other
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
around,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
so it's just yeah, there's a lot to be said about Lent and about penance, but I think that's a really beautiful time for a lot of people to grow closer to our Lord intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because that's what it has been for me is, yeah, these times of sacrifice and going into the desert with Jesus. And I feel like you kind of feel like you can, if you're in those times like me, like I was addicted to TV, and like for those first like 3 days, maybe up to a week, where you kind of feel like a crack addict, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I need to watch TV. Sunday better come. I can let up on my fast. But then like, yeah, it becomes a little easier as the time goes on, and I feel like that's where I felt the most like the gift from God, like that gift of detaching from that and putting my focus on like adding prayer time, because if I was like gonna sacrifice TV, I think what I said is I'm also going to pick up a spiritual book. And so when I wanted to watch TV, I would try to pick up that spiritual book, even if I was going to read like 3 pages of it, and that would just kind of refocus my eyes like back to where
Yeah.
they were supposed to focus. And I found that I by the end of that Lent, I felt the most I don't know, like refreshed, even though we kind of just went through a season of sacrifice. I felt like by the end of it, that sacrifice I was giving was less of a sacrifice now. Like I didn't feel like the need to like, oh, thank goodness Lent's over. Like let's kick the TV back on now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. But
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about virtue ethics. If you have an understanding of how virtue ethics, Aristotle, St. Thomas, how all that works, is that after you've acquired a virtue, it's good
mm-hmm,
and pleasurable to enact that
mm-hmm,
virtue. So, somebody who has the
mm-hmm,
virtue of temperance, they actually like fasting. It's pleasurable to them. That
mm-hmm,
doesn't mean that they don't still feel hungry and maybe get hangry a little bit or something like this, but
mm-hmm.
it does
Yeah.
mean that they enjoy the fast because they recognize it's good for them. And the same thing for somebody who likes to work out, right? You said you used to be a personal trainer.
Mm-hmm,
Somebody that is in
yeah.
really good shape, they look forward to a heavy set of bench press, even though it's really not very comfortable. There's a
Mm-hmm,
lot of
yeah.
stress and strain being put on your body, but that's one of the indications that you've acquired the virtue. So, what the devil's going to do is just make you focus on all the little pleasures you have to give up because he knows once you've developed the virtue, then naturally, easily, joyfully, you're going to do all those virtuous acts that follow.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And I've heard that the enemy works like he'll try to get you to fall into sin by like directly tempting you with it, and if it's not working, or if like he feels you growing in that virtue, then from there he's just going to try to distract you at that point. Just like I've heard someone say that if the devil can't bring you down, he's going to try to get you to stand still. Is this something you
Mhm.
have you heard that before? Like he'll go from trying to tear you down. If he feels like he can't tear you down and you're a virtuous person, he'll try to at least get you to just stay still and not do anything.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, that's totally true. I think this is one of the reasons it's important to have a good understanding of the interplay between faith and works.
Hmm.
Sometimes Catholics will get this idea that you have to earn your way to heaven, and that's really
Hmm.
not the way that the church's understanding of faith and works is
Hmm.
expressed in her own teachings. Not at all. The way that it
Yeah.
works, if you look at the Council of Trent's decree on justification, and this is really important for our Protestant brothers and sisters to understand, is that grace is a totally free gift from God. You don't earn that,
Hmm.
not at all.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church baptizes babies who have done nothing good,
Yeah.
right? Not that babies aren't wonderful and beautiful, but just they haven't developed the intellectual faculties necessary to make a conscious decision to do good or evil. So you don't earn
Hmm.
your salvation by any stretch of the imagination. However,
Yeah.
once you're in grace, you can do what the scriptures talk about. St. Paul says that you can St. Peter says that you need to make sure your election by good works. So, the
Hmm.
way that the church conceptualizes the interplay between faith and works is that grace is a totally free gift that is increased, right? You dispose yourself to receive more grace by doing good works. It's
Hmm.
increased and it is safeguarded or protected
Hmm.
by good works because all the spiritual writers in the Catholic tradition have made the observation that in the spiritual life, you're either heading forwards or backwards. It's virtually impossible to stand
Yeah.
still. So you either have
Hmm.
to be using the virtues that you have and growing in those and getting closer to our Lord, or else your enemy, the devil, who prowls about like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour, is going to launch an attack against you. So good works are
Yeah.
so important. They're not dispensable because if
Yeah.
you're not fighting and you're not making progress forward, what that
Hmm.
means is the enemy is attacking you, and whether you realize it or not, you're losing battles and losing ground.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, and then I come from a Protestant background, but I wasn't well catechized at all. I grew up in a Baptist church, but I honestly couldn't even tell you anything about the Baptist like teaching and what they are or anything. But um, but that, yeah, that's been a common um, thing that's come up ever since I become Catholic. That being a thing brought up by Protestants that have told me, like, be careful what you're getting yourself involved with, is that they believe you have to earn your way to heaven, and that's not something you want to like get into. Um, but first, like, it's really interesting. Do you feel like though that most objections, because I know we'll get into some of the objections later, but most of the objections come from, I want to say this without sounding like I'm saying anything mean, but like kind of a state of ignorance. Like it's just kind of a. I feel like people will say Catholics believe this, and it's just like, well, no, we don't. And it's just
Yeah.
because like they'll say Catholics believe in faith and works. We they believe you have to earn your way to heaven. Do you think there are a lot of the arguments and a lot of the debates and a lot of the fiery conversations on social media happen due to a lack of knowledge of what the Catholic Church actually teaches?
Yeah, I don't think that assuming the other person is ignorant is the uncharitable position. I think the uncharitable position is assuming the other person knows better and continues to spread what they know to be false.
Hmm.
So, whenever you're looking at Protestants and a lot of the Protestant objections, I'll just focus on Mary, right?
Hmm.
Protestants over and over and over again say that Catholics worship Mary. If you know what worship is in the way that the Catholic Church is defining it, meaning latria, and you know what we do as Catholics towards Mary, then it's immediately evident that Catholics do not worship Mary, right? If you
Hmm.
know what Catholics do to Mary and you know what the word worship means, latria, then it's
Hmm.
self evident that Catholics are not doing that to Mary, right? And it's
Yeah.
not a difficult distinction to make. I used to
Hmm.
teach seventh graders and I would
Hmm.
teach them the distinction between latria and dulia and, hyperdulia for Mary, obviously.
Hmm.
But I would teach them that distinction, and it was a question everybody got right on the quizzes. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not a
Mhm.
difficult concept. So I
Yeah.
think that really what you have to assume with Protestants is that either A, they don't know these distinctions, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe they just haven't heard, and they see somebody kneeling down before a statue of Our Lady of Fatima, and they go, "Look, that's worship," and they don't know the distinctions. And people like
Mhm.
that deserve a tremendous amount of charity and grace and a tremendous amount of
Yeah.
patience because you were one of them presumably at one point, right? Coming from a coming
Mhm.
from a Baptist background, right?
Yep.
Maybe you didn't understand what Catholics taught about Mary. So those people deserve an incredible amount of patience
Mhm.
and charity. But then you have other people who I know, in the social media sphere. I'm not trying to speak badly of anybody in particular, but it's
Mhm.
difficult for me to imagine that some of the people out there in the Protestant sphere, they're
Mhm.
smart people I know they're
Yeah.
smart people. I've
Yeah.
watched them put together some very well thought out content. I know that their reading comprehension is better than my seventh graders. I know that for a fact. But you
Yeah.
see some even well educated Protestants who just say that Mary is worshipped by Catholics. And that's
Hmm.
demonstrably false. If you know what the terms mean, it's obvious that that's not the case. So I
Yeah.
think it's actually the more charitable position to assume
Hmm.
ignorance might not be the right word. Nescience would probably be a better word. Ignorance implies that you're choosing not to know something to a certain degree. Nescience just means that you don't know, right? But
Yeah.
that's the approach I always try to take whenever I'm interacting with Protestants or anything like that. Is I always assume the best, and the best in this case is that they don't know any better. All right,
Yeah.
forgive them, Father; they know not what they do, kind of vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I'll speak bad on someone. I myself, like I said, I came into the Catholic Church, and I actually thought to myself, did I come in without enough objections? Like, should I have had objections? I just kind of sat in OCA, knew nothing about anything. I came from the so I grew up in a Baptist church, but at ninth grade, my parents were like, "You guys can decide if you want to go to church. This is your own choice. You guys can decide if you want to go to a different church." And all my cross country high school track friends, they're like, "We're going to this church. It's a non-denominational church. It's great." And so we started going there, and it was very much just like Jesus Christ came and died on the cross for your sins, so you are saved. And that was it. Like that was the gospel message. Um, so I kind of that's the only sort of thing I used to believe. I didn't really necessarily like hold it so firm that I would like argue with a Catholic or anything, or really any other denomination. But I that's what I believe, but I never sought anything else out. So when I sat in an OCA class, I had no knowledge of anything. I didn't ever read a Bible or anything, but I was so blessed with such a great catechist that walked through everything to the point where I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I would obviously ask questions. I was one of the ones that asked a lot of questions in OCA. But sometimes the only thing I will say is I came in thinking the only bad thing I thought was this is so scripted. Everything's so scripted in mass that it's the only thing I don't like about it is it's in a very uh, impersonal religion, and that's what I thought. That's what I thought. The more I got into it, though, and then became Catholic, and then we started getting into adoration, and so I mean, it was through the OCA process of realizing no, this is like extremely personal. Like this is
Mm.
a beautiful thing, and there's a great reason why things are scripted in mass, but. I was definitely one of those guys that was kind of like out of ignorance, just saying like this is also scripted. You're scripting everything, and everyone's just reading everything off a piece of paper or off out of a book. That's super impersonal. There's nothing personal behind that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of that is, I totally see where those objections come from. But at the same time, you can't get much more personal than eating somebody.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I suppose that would be my response.
Yeah. Well, and then learning of like why it's scripted in mass and where like why we're saying this or why the priest is saying this and why we're responding this way, where it's at in the Bible or where it's referencing into the Bible, and that's where everything started like come to. I was like, oh, okay, like this is all making sense now. Like this is great. Then when we really started getting into the faith and getting into like the young adult group, started going to adoration and started realizing the beauty of confession, and all of a sudden I was like, this like I can't believe I ever thought this was in person. Like this is like one of the most personal faiths like I've ever been a part of. Like they really care about like the true like your true like your soul and your like I don't know just everything. I don't know. It was just a beautiful uh, conversion into the Catholic faith. But I came with no objections. So sometimes I've always been curious. So when I'm a convert, people are like, you should talk to this person because he's not Catholic, but he's kind of considering it, but he has a lot of questions. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm the right person to I will talk to you for sure. I don't know if I'm the right person for that though. So I've been like still
So
learning a lot.
what made you decide to become Catholic if you didn't have any objections? A lot of people who I talk to who are converts, I've talked to
Hmm.
lots of them, but many of them say, well, I wanted to prove the Catholic Church wrong, or I wanted to
Hmm.
understand the church's position on Mary so that I could shoot it down. And then I figured out that, wow, the apostles and the church fathers all thought the same things that the Catholic Church teaches today. And
Hmm.
so I converted, right? If you didn't have any of those objections that you were able to shoot down for yourself, what was it that kind of drew you into the faith?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was Eucharist. Like getting into that, um, the teaching of it, like, because that was something for me. Like, I mean, I'd been involved in Life Church, and where the Eucharist, you can get the Eucharist at any time, every day if you want to. It's on a little side table in the back, and a little lamp, and it's a little grape juice and a cracker that you pull back. It's like a little lunchable. Um, and so I come from a place where it's like it's truly a symbol, and it's really not even that important of a symbol. It's like it'll go to the back of the church. So I never really like thought much of it. But when we started diving into it and getting into John 6 and what Paul says about the Eucharist and really diving into like, no, 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 this is like the Last Supper. Like, let's read it again and like not only read what is being said, but take into account what the crowds are doing. So he says this, he doubles down on it 6 times. He tells them 6 times. He actually even changes the word to what is it, trogo, where it's like, no, to gnaw on my flesh. And the crowds start dispersing. They start leaving. They're like, this guy's crazy, and starts leaving. And I'm like, if it was symbolic, if it wasn't truly like the real presence, he would have turned to his disciples and said, "Hey, go grab them. They're misunderstanding what I'm saying." I feel like an all-loving Lord would have like said, "Hey, go get them. They misunderstood what I said," or they would have. He would have tried to clarify in some way. But the fact that he looked at them and said, "Are you going to leave also?" It's just like, whoa, like that's wild. And like, and in their response, like, where would we go, Lord? And I love that. And just like when it was broken down, and we obviously spent a whole OCIA class on this, maybe even multiple, just diving into it, what it is, why we're so reverent about it. I kind of fell in love with that aspect of it. So that was the
Yeah.
main.
Yeah, the entire gospel makes much less sense without the Eucharist. I mean, if you
Yeah.
just read the Bible in context and you look at St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5:7, if I remember correctly, he says that we have Christ as our new paschal lamb. So let us keep the feast. And if you
Yeah.
know anything about the Old Testament, you know that the paschal lamb was the most important sacrifice of the Jewish calendar every year, other
Mm-hmm.
than arguably the high priest entering in with blood once a year. But it was a very, very important sacrifice. And in order to be saved and to enjoy the benefits of the Passover for the Jewish people in the Old Testament, you had to eat the lamb. That was one of the things that
Yeah.
God commanded, was you had to sacrifice the lamb in a very specific way with certain bitter herbs. You had to do it while standing. You had to eat the lamb. That was an essential part. There are no good Jewish vegetarians. Can't happen, because at least
Yeah.
once a year you have to eat lamb. You have
Yeah.
to. It's obligatory,
The whole thing.
and you weren't able to have any leftovers. So he's very specific
Yeah.
about a lot of the details concerning this lamb. But one of the major requirements is you have to eat the lamb. And St. Paul says, Christ is our new paschal lamb. Let us keep the feast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And if anyone wants to see a great conversation about this, Alex from The Voice of Reason just had a great conversation with George Janko. Have you seen that video yet?
No, I haven't. I was with
Yeah,
Alex over the weekend and I talked to him about
it's
it briefly, but I haven't actually watched the
yeah,
video yet. I'm so bad.
it
I don't watch much Catholic YouTube. Usually if I have time to consume content, I'm listening to an audiobook or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, anyone out there listening that wants to listen to, I'll pin it in the comments. Just he does a really great job of a couple things that we've already touched on. Is a having a conversation with a Protestant and a Protestant that's super I won't say catechized, what's the word? Like just devout in their faith and the way they are taught and what they believe. He does a great job of like communicating with love, like communicating with passion and standing up for the faith. But he does it in a way I just watched it and I was like, this is how Jesus would have wanted people to like approach others. Does it with love, and what it does is it makes George Janko, who kind of really dumped on Catholicism in the Christian Avengers movie, it makes him love on Alex back. And they like talked about how like he could see this conversation going on for the next 10 years and they coming on each other's shows and continuing the conversation. I was like, man, that's what you want. Like that's such a great representation. They both found common ground on things they believe. The next thing I was going to ask too is that with Protestants, where do you go when the the conversation gets to, as it does in that video, they get the common ground all the way to, I believe that is the true presence as well. Like George Jenko at one point says that like, he believes that that was also the true present. Like he believes that it is present there as well. Like, where does it go from there? Like, if that's the conversation where it goes.
Yeah, so There's a lot of Protestants who have started to recognize that the early church, starting with the apostles, going on to Ignatius of Antioch,
Mm,
Saint Augustine, Saint John Damascene, John Chrysostom, the early church, they're all very, very clear that the Eucharist is more than symbolic. If you care
mm,
about the church fathers at all and you start reading them, you will obviously come to that conclusion that it's more than symbolic. And
yeah.
so, if you are in a church where it's simply symbolic, I think the next question will be that, well, which church actually has a right to this claim? Which church
Hmm.
actually has the power to confect the Eucharist? Because I've been in the discussion before with a Protestant, and I asked him, can a woman confer the Eucharist? Can she do that? Does she have the power
Hmm.
to make the Eucharist? And he had no answer. He's like, well, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's in the Bible, but I don't really see why not. And I said, okay,
Yeah.
like that's fine. I agree. I don't think that she can, but can I do it? I don't believe I have the power to, but I am a
Hmm.
baptized Christian man. Can I do it?
Hmm.
And like I don't think I can, but
Yeah.
according to your logic, it would seem like maybe I could, and they just don't have answers for who can do it and who can't do it.
Mm,
And the only
yeah.
church I think that really get well, churches maybe that give a really clear, definite answer to that question are the Orthodox and the Catholics. Because if
Hmm.
you have something like a Lutheran church, right, where they believe in something very, very similar to what the Catholic Church teaches about the Eucharist, it's clearly different, but there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
Then you start to ask these questions, you start to push a little bit further, and you start to look into it, and you realize they don't have the answers, right? And it'd
Hmm.
be one thing if they had an answer that was wrong that you could prove wrong, but
Mm,
oftentimes it's just this gray area, and they kind of punt and they don't know exactly how to get clarity. And
hmm.
if Christ wanted clarity in his church, which I think he did, John chapter
Yeah.
17, he talks about the unity he wants for his believers. If Christ wanted clarity and unity in his church, it's necessary upon him to create some sort of mechanism where that clarity can be created. And in Protestantism, there just isn't that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and if the Protestants did want to have clarity on their doctrine and unity, this is what they would do. They would elect one man to be, or else they would have councils of men
Hmm.
where their decisions would be universally binding upon all Protestants to believe. Well,
Hmm.
you just recreated the Catholic Church's ecclesiology, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all you did.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Because that's where I'm at. Like when I say baby Catholic, I'll say I feel like I have a decent knowledge, but I would say a baby apologist. So if I was to get in a conversation with someone super devout Protestant, I may struggle a little bit. So that's where my main focus has been, like continuing to grow in my own faith. Um, but yeah, those conversations though sometimes seem to hit a brick wall, and I guess it's at that point where you would just stop and not stop, but like you want to continue the relationship, continue the conversation, and I guess at that point is where you turn to prayer. Like you just pray for the person and hope they have a conversion of heart as you continue the conversation, like throughout, like your relationship with them.
Yeah, it all comes down to whenever you're trying to evangelize, it all comes back to prayer. It
Yeah,
doesn't matter. I mean, there are nuns locked up in convents who haven't seen anything but their convent walls for 25 years. And
yeah,
you and I will never know their names until the end of the world, whenever all the good that they've done is revealed. They've
yeah,
converted thousands more souls than I ever will. Right? It doesn't matter what I'm doing if it's not backed by prayer. It doesn't matter. And Alex would say this too, but it doesn't matter what Alex from Voices of Reason is doing. It doesn't matter
yeah,
what Braden, the catechumen, Adrian, it does absolutely does not matter what they're doing if their efforts are not backed by prayer, right?
yeah.
And
Hmm.
we've all talked about this a little bit, or at least a lot of the guys I just mentioned, we've talked about this before. But the foundation stone of evangelization is prayer, because ultimately I can't change anybody's heart and mind. I can give them some information, but so what? There's
Hmm.
thousands of Protestants that have more information about church history, more information about the scriptures, more information about all
Yeah,
those things than I have, right? So the information is not the key. The key is a really, really devout, focused, intentional prayer and trust and surrender to our Lord and Savior Jesus
hmm,
Christ. And that's what it all comes down to. I don't know if I'm the greatest apologist out there. I'm sure that I'm not. But one thing I do very intentionally is I pray every single day for anybody who consumes any of the content that I produce to be
hmm,
washed in the precious blood of Jesus. So whatever I'm doing, even if I'm not making the best arguments or I have the best editing or the best camera work or whatever I'm doing, I'm confident that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is hearing and answering that prayer. And so I'm confident that my work is bearing fruit, even though I am certainly not doing a perfect job. So
Mhm.
yeah, it all comes back to prayer. It all comes back to prayer. Always, always, right? Um, yeah, and people just don't know how to pray anymore, I think, is part of the problem.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and a fruit of yours too is, I'm not gonna lie, I've never prayed before one of these. Like, prayed with my guests before, but right before we started, you're like, "You want to pray real fast, and we'll get this started." And I literally thought to myself, like, "That's actually a really good idea. I should be doing that. Like, why not? Like, why am I not doing this?" But yeah, no. If stuff's not based out of prayer, it's it's kind of like just everything in life. It just becomes disordered, and it falls apart. And it's not necessarily you can't do good, but so much more could come out of what you're doing when you're not just trying to stronghold and do it yourself. I was talking to a focus missionary one time, and their big phrase is "win, build, send." And so winning people over to the gospel message, and for them wanting to know Jesus more, and that they win them over in that relationship, building that relationship with them as a friend, and then they invite them into like Bible study, and then they're building them up in their faith. They're teaching them to to defend the faith, but also just to understand the faith, understand the Bible, the gospel message, salvation history, the crux. And then they are sending them to be a disciple. Now let's start your own Bible study and be out there. But the focus missionary that I do discipleship with, he's at our parish. He said, "What do you think it takes to be a good focus missionary?" And I was like, "I think it's in your guys' mission. It's that focusing on the win, build, sin." And I explained all that to him. And he was like, "You're missing one thing, though. You first have to be one, and you have to build yourself. And then you've got to be willing to be sent." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's a great point." I think sometimes it's so easy just to get into the weeds and get right to it, like get right into the episode, or jump right into, even if you're leading a Bible study, you jump right into it before starting with prayer, jump right into a meal before starting with prayer. It's just so easy to sideline that for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think it's also just really powerful too. If this is something I do before I start any of my videos that I host on my channel, is I always start with a quick prayer and I just consecrate it to Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. I basically
Mm-hmm.
say, "This is in your hands. I surrender this to you. Whatever happens, you're in charge."
Yeah.
And so I think that takes it's just an act of faith. And if you believe that that prayer has been heard, then it allows you to kind of take your hand off the wheel a little bit and just let the Holy Spirit take over, right? To quote Carrie
Yeah.
Underwood, you just let Jesus take the wheel at this point. But you
Yeah.
just, yeah, have a real faith that a prayer is being heard and answered.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're going through the conversation, you feel something on your heart or in your mind that you want to bring up, or you feel the opposite, where you feel like this isn't something I should say right now, even though it might be a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just really start to discern the work of the Holy Spirit in your heart through all of that. And so, yeah, I think that
Yeah.
before you start an action, consecrating it to Our Lady is just it makes everything better.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. Well, I wanted to kind of kick it back to you. Honestly, I meant to do this at the beginning, but now that we're 32 minutes in, like, to tell us a little bit about your story, like cradle Catholic convert. How did you met your wife? Like, any kind of your story to kind of round us out of who you are.
Yeah, so I grew up in a Catholic household and was going to mass every Sunday. I don't think I ever really embraced the faith as my own until much later in college. For the first few years of college and later in high school, I was going to mass on Sundays, but really that was about it. My faith wasn't changing the way that I behaved really to any noticeable capacity at all. And whenever I was in college, I started to date this Protestant woman who was a Southern Baptist, actually. And her father was a Protestant minister. She helped out with the music on Sundays, all these things. They were just wonderful people, very, very charitable and kind and hospitable to me. But as we were dating, it quickly became apparent that Catholics and Baptists don't think the same about many things.
Mm-hmm.
And so through studying that, more so to win arguments than anything else, which, I was a fairly new convert, just getting in my faith. I had plenty of zeal, but not very much understanding and patience. So
Mm-hmm.
I had zeal, but it was not informed. And I was going through and learning all these things and trying to share them with the woman that I was dating. And it wasn't until kind of afterwards that all the truth that I had data dumped into myself kind of started to sink into my heart. And that's whenever I decided that I was going to try to enter into seminary. Obviously, she and I had broken up at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So through studying apologetics because of this girl I was dating, I fell radically in love with Jesus Christ and decided that I wanted to go into seminary. So that's what I did. I was there for a short time, discerned out, got a master's degree in theology, and then came to Arizona where I met my beautiful wife. And she and I dated for 6 weeks, got engaged, and best decision I've ever made.
Hmm.
She's been just wonderful by my side throughout all of this. The YouTube journey has been a little crazy. The family life has been a little crazy, but she's my ride or die. She's she's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
She's fantastic. So we got 2 kids now, and
Nice.
yeah, God willing, many more in the future.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And then the YouTube stuff, did you like kind of know you wanted to do that, start it up, or I know a lot of people are like, no, I kind of started making videos and then it just kind of took off on me. Like, what was the story behind that?
Yeah, so I was teaching. I was teaching Catholic theology at a Catholic high school, and
Hmm.
we were doing okay. But my wife was a stay-at-home. She was expecting, and we had a 1.5-year-old running around, and our 1.5-year-old was a handful as a baby. She was about all we could handle. I think she was
Hmm.
highly magnesium deficient.
Hmm.
This week, right? This past 5 days, she slept through the
Hmm.
night, all the way through the night. That's the first time in her life that that's ever really happened. And
Oh,
she's two
wow.
and a, she's 2.5, right? So it's been a busy 2.5 years. It's been really tough. Not much
Yeah.
sleep. I think hopefully we got that figured out now.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, please let things settle down a little bit. It's been
Yeah.
a hectic 2.5 years. But with the YouTube channel, I was teaching and we're just looking at, our home life was really tough because Celine was terrorizing my wife. Celine's my 2-year-old, and she's wonderful now, very sweet, but it
Hmm.
was tough. My wife was very pregnant at this point. And there's lots of things adding up on the home front. Then, additionally, if I wanted to continue teaching, well, you're looking at a pretty hard salary cap, and it's enough to get by, but it's not like we'll ever be able to start to save any money, get ahead,
Yeah.
redo the
Yeah.
backyard, all these other things. I would have to pick up a summer job anyway, which I was fine doing, but I just wanted to explore my options as much as possible. And so I
Hmm.
tried to figure out a way that I could use the talents and the gifts that God has given me, and I could
Hmm.
leverage that in a way that was going to be hopefully someday a little bit more financially viable for our
Yeah.
family, and something that ultimately would give us the flexibility and the freedom to travel, to do all the things that we want to do. And so I was making YouTube videos for a little bit, and I had one just kind of take off, and I got monetized very quickly. And so I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe this will work. I don't know. And then what happened was I crashed my car. So I
Oh.
was driving to school in August, about a year and a half ago, I suppose, coming up on 2 years.
Hmm.
And the car in front of me, the car in front of, they're all just a long line of cars slammed on their brakes. So I ended up rear-ending this Jeep Liberty, which was totally fine. They actually drove off, which is not legal, but they just drove off after the accident, and my car was it was totaled. It was gone. So I'm in the car and I'm looking around, and my laptop flew forward onto the ground. I'm just making sure I'm not about to get rear-ended. And the first thing I say is, "Blessed be God." I just feel like God gave me a real grace at that moment to know that
Hmm.
this was part of the plan. This is what we were doing. And so I said, "Blessed be God." Then our family, we get the money from the insurance company, and that's enough for us to kind of take the financial hit of not having an income for a while I started
Hmm.
this YouTube channel and tried to figure out how the heck I was going to make money off of it.
Yeah.
And we're just now getting to a point where we're starting to be in the black instead of just breaking even every month, which
Hmm.
thanks be to God for that. But yeah, my wife has
Yeah.
just been so gracious going through, and
Hmm.
yeah, just willing to trust me and willing to follow my lead and willing to go where I deem best, even though it's not immediately obvious how it's going to work itself out. And so
Hmm. Yeah.
that's just been really, really beautiful. But yeah,
Yeah.
the car accident is really what allowed us to take the jump as a family and start
Hmm.
doing this. And so that's how the YouTube channel started. It was
Yeah. Man, that's
certainly not
awesome.
entirely my doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That is awesome. And then one thing you said that just aligns exactly with something that's been like in my heart and prayer time, and it's kind of rounded out and turned into the mission of this podcast, but is using the gifts and the talents that God gave you to do something. And I've ran into so many people lately that are like a guy, to use an example, a guy that he works on cars, loves to work on cars. A lady from his church, the car broke down and does her only transportation, and so he's like, "Well, let me tow it over to my house. Let me look at it. No promises, but I can at least look at it for you." he looks at it, has it for 2 weeks, and is like, I think I figured out what's wrong with it. Starts it up, and it's been running well ever since. And she's like, well, how much do I owe you for it? He's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. He said it was only a couple $100. It wasn't something that was like gonna completely bankrupt him or anything. But he says sometimes cars are like that. Like they take little fixes, but if you take them to a mechanic shop, they're gonna charge you $2,000 for that $200 fix. And he's like, I really wish that I could do something like this as a ministry for people in need. And so I was like, why don't you partner with me? I was like, what if we did that? What if that was our mission? As this, we I feel like that's the kind of the talents and the gifts that God gave me as well. Is just kind of talking with people and conversing. I genuinely care about people and what they like, their lives and their experience. I love to hear conversion stories and stuff. And I was like, man, the YouTube channel just kind of falls right in that. I think it'd be great. But for someone like you, what if I was able to raise support and awareness of this and people were able to become monthly supporters, do stuff like that? And for every X amount of dollars, we would help like do free oil changes for people in need in rural Oklahoma and the rural parishes where people maybe can't afford to do those oil changes now, $100, $120. And he's like I could come in and do it for, it costs like $30 an oil change. So it's like, okay, so we could say if someone signs up, supports at $30 a month, we can do an oil change once a month for someone in need. And he's like, that sounds great. I love it. And then we ran into someone who does decks and he builds decks and he's built a handicap ramp for a lady one time. And he's like, I'd love to do that kind of stuff for free, but wood, all that kind of stuff at the time, it's so much money. I can't do it for free. And so I was like, man, what if I paid you to do it? We could go out there and help other people in need. So that's completely free to that person, but we're able to use your talents and your gifts for ministry to help the community. And so it's kind of shaped what this is all turned into. And that's been our big focus and our big push. And we're working right now of hopefully kind of partnering with Catholic Charities here in Tulsa to, I don't know, partner together in some way where it's like, hey, whatever comes in, I'll send you guys the money and you guys can continue doing what you do. And so I love hearing that. I always love hearing when people are like, these are the talents that God gave me and I used them for the kingdom to grow his kingdom.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. Jesus says in Luke's gospel, he says, Date et dabitur vobis, which means give and it shall be given unto you. It's really true that the more that you give away, the more that you dispose yourself to receive. And so I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people just don't know that there's a false sort of humility there for a lot of people where they think that they don't have anything valuable to offer. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a gross underestimation of the extreme, beautiful, unique talents that our Lord has given to each and every one of us. Sometimes a phone call to a family member, right? It absolutely makes their day. That's an example of you being able to use the talents, use the gifts that you've been
Mm-hmm.
given well. You don't have to, the oil change, the car mechanic, the building decks, wonderful. Your talents may be smaller than that. Start using those
Yeah.
well, and new doors will open. I guarantee it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean. My full time job right now is I'm the development director for a university parish. So I'm doing fundraising and I'm constantly meeting with donors. And a lot of them do give big chunks of money. And that's something that they were blessed with and they steward their money very well. But I also meet with a lot of people that are like, well, tell me, like, we don't have a lot to give. We're super tight, whatever. But I always try to make sure like I'm not ever coming just for money, but I'm coming to like as that part of the ministry. Like I'm coming to let them know or to help them serve God in a way of like giving with their time, talent, or treasure. And sometimes it's maybe you don't have the treasure to give right now, but you have the time or you have a specific talent that could help. Maybe you're like right now we're having issues with our card readers that help you get into the building. It's like, man, someone could have that talent of like knowing the wiring and stuff and doing all that kind of stuff. Or maybe someone like help us fix the like replacing tiles or maybe you just have the time and you're able to come up and help clean up around the parish. And so I'm always pitching that, and I think that we're kind of getting away from that. I don't know if it translates to other things. I'd be interested to see what you think. But I know in the giving world, the monetary giving world, in like 1994, there was a study done that said 78% of people, not just Christians, not just Catholics, just people in general, gave to some sort of charitable organization. But now it's just about flipped, and it's like 24% of
Hmm.
people give to a charitable organization, which is really interesting because it makes my job at my work like very important because it's like we got to go out there and kind of convince people like why should you give, like why should you give to your parish or why should you give to a Catholic charities or something. Do you think that translates though to same with talent and time? Do you think people maybe are in today's society, and again not Catholics or Christians necessarily, just people in general, that people aren't willing to give up their time as much nowadays, or they have talents but maybe they're not willing to use those talents unless there's some money behind it. Do you kind of see that today's society?
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I think that we live in a very hyper individualized society, and so the common good and the community good have been denigrated, belittled. They're just not what they used to be. Even
Hmm.
just having strong community relationships is something that's kind of pushed by the wayside. Most people have no idea who their neighbors are anymore, right? Most people
Yeah,
live in an apartment building, or lots of people do, and they don't even know who's living in the door next to them. And that's
yeah.
just kind of the way that it is, and that's kind of what our society has been bred for in a certain sense, with technology, with the
Hmm.
ability to talk to anyone in the world at any time. Well, you don't really need to talk to your neighbor anymore because you can talk to somebody who you know better and like better just by
Yeah,
clicking a few buttons on your cell phone. So I think that's
yeah.
probably the case. I do think that that's probably going to change here in the next 20, 15 years, though, because we're starting to see a renewed emphasis on community and in-person interactions. It's just a pendulum, I think. Things
Hmm.
get over here, everything's hyper digitalized, hyper individualistic, and then we'll swing back to the other side and end up with people having beautiful, wonderful communities and being able to do all these things in person that
Hmm.
nobody wants to do online anymore. So I think that's probably the way that it goes, just back and forth over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that would be kind of maybe a way of. And my wife's always talking about history repeats itself, and just maybe like there's a technology boom and there's stuff like great advances and things, but maybe it's actually causing people to want more human engagement. Like
Yeah.
I'm thinking that like that's how I get sometimes. Like when I used to be addicted to TV and like I can get really bad at just watching social media, scrolling on social media, and a lot of times when I get into a doom scrolling mode, I can find myself wanting to put it down and wanting to like text my friends like, "Who's doing something? Like, is anybody doing something right now? Like, let's go out, like, do something."
Yeah. Yeah. I think every time that there's an abundance created, there's a scarcity that's accidentally created. So right now, it's so easy to have well written, polished, AI generated everything.
Mm,
And so what
yeah,
people are starting to crave more and more is that real, authentic human interaction. That's one of the
yeah,
reasons I think that you can't actually have a mass that's celebrated online. You need to
yeah,
go to the mass to fulfill your Sunday obligation. And I think that's part of the church's wisdom, making sure that people have those real human interactions at least once a week. Hopefully much more, but at least once a week on
yeah,
Sundays.
yeah, yeah. And if you haven't seen the impact of COVID on people and how it really affected our social cues and our social communication and stuff, just go visit your local college parish or college or whatever you're going to go. Just go see some of the college students now because those are the people that were like the freshmen right now would have been freshmen in high school when COVID hit. So some of those most important developmental years, especially in the social side, um, were I mean they were locked down and they were online. And then even when the restrictions started uplifting or like lifting, they still had the opportunity to stay online and stuff. And then so I think we saw like people wanting to stay home and like take advantage of this like doing school from home, online classes and stuff. But now, I mean, our priest over here at TU, he like specifically does dinners at the rectory where he lives and invites students and his sole purpose is to teach them how to date because there's so many of them that have kind of lost the social cues or they never learned it because they were it was COVID during those times.
Yeah, yeah, those social cues are tough to pick up on if you kind of miss them young. It's
Hmm.
not irremediable, but it's certainly difficult. So that's cool that
Yeah.
he's doing that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really
yeah,
cool.
it's so cool. I
It's kind
love
of
the
funny.
fact that a priest is like, "I'm going to teach them how to date," and I'm like, "Yeah, Father, let's go." Super cool. But well, that's awesome. Well, I know something that I've been wanting to get into a little bit, especially knowing your background. Obviously, I've been like watching your videos for a while. Is just some of the objections that Protestants may have against Catholics, or maybe even just misconceptions against Catholics. I know we've touched on a few of them already, but I want to ask you, like what is some of the most common ones you've come across?
Yeah, Mary. Mary is the biggest one over and over and over again. And I
Hmm.
think that it's because the devil knows that as soon as somebody turns to Mary, they're beyond his clutches. And so he's doing everything that he can to stir up as much of an emotional reaction towards Mary
Yeah.
as is humanly possible. And it's interesting because you can have really nice good conversations with people in the comments or Protestants in person. And Sola Scriptura, or I don't know what's another one, Sola Fide, right? The faith
Yeah.
alone. But bringing up Mary, it just inherently brings a little bit of an edge to the conversation. It's a really fascinating phenomenon. And my intuition, my guess is that it's like I said, the devil's doing everything that he can to stir up negative emotions towards
Hmm.
the Blessed Virgin Mary, because he knows as soon as somebody turns to Mary, they're gone. It's like
Yeah.
he can't touch them anymore. It's game
Yeah.
over. She wins every time, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is the Blessed Virgin Mary, and then it's secondarily the intercession of the saints, the Eucharist, the papacy. All of those are big issues as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Mary one's interesting. I had a this is how the conversation started. So maybe this be see what your like response would be. Is that so we do a Tuesday lunch, and so we do it for the entire university. We or invite the entire university. We're small campus over here at Tulsa. We're about 2,600 undergrad, but we'll have like 120 to 130 people come in. But the security guards love to come in, like the campus police, and they're in there. And we have one, I believe, that's Catholic, but the other ones aren't. But they're Christian, and they one of them said, was it the Catholics believe like what was the it was the Assumption of Mary, like what is that, like what do you guys believe about Mary being like assumed into heaven? And he asked that question, and again, baby apologist, baby Catholic, and the Marian like doctrines and stuff, or the teachings on Mary and stuff is something that I'm really working on now. But when he said that, I was like that. Like I don't know how to answer that honestly. He wasn't directed towards me, so I was kind of a little bit not as put on the spot. But what would you respond to that, or what is the kind of the? So no, that itself is a big objection. Is just Mary being assumed into heaven, and there being like no biblical support for that, or whatever. Like what would have been a good response for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, whenever you are dealing with Protestants, it's really important to listen first and to figure
Yeah,
out exactly where their objection is before you start trying to explain the Catholic position. Because
yeah,
that's a mistake a lot of people make, and it's a mistake I've certainly made in the past as well. Is you start trying to explain something and you end up just explaining things that you guys already both agree upon. The other person doesn't
mm,
feel heard and doesn't feel like you're getting to their objections, and you're frustrated because you think you just explained it really well, and they're not,
mm,
groveling on the ground asking Mary for mercy. So
yeah,
what it is it's really, really important, and it's important to make sure that you are truly listening to the Protestant who's speaking and not speaking past them,
mm,
and even repeating back to them and saying, so let me get this straight. What you're saying is da 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 da, and make sure that they're approving of the way that you're understanding. Then you can move on from there. Because but so assuming that you've done that, you can start with the Assumption of Mary. You could start looking in the scriptures. You can look at the typology between Mary and the Ark of the Covenant, and you can look at how the Ark of the Covenant in Revelation chapter 11 is in heaven, right? So, for anyone who doesn't know, there are obvious connections between chapter 1 of Luke's gospel and oh, it's in Samuel somewhere. I think it's 1 Samuel 17. Do not quote me on that. But it's the passage where the Ark of the Covenant, which has been lost, is recovered, and it's entering into the holy city, Jerusalem, right? And David says, how can it be that the Ark of the Lord has come to me? Whenever Mary goes to Elizabeth, Elizabeth says, how can it be that the mother of my Lord has come to me?
mm,
Both the Ark and Mary dwell in the hill country in Judea for 3 months before they return to Jerusalem. You can see John the Baptist dancing, right, leaping in
mhm,
his mother's womb, and you can see David dancing and leaping for joy as the ark enters. And you can see that the Ark of the Covenant was overshadowed, right? It's a very specific Greek word, epi. Oof, I don't remember the word right now, but it's epi something. But the
mhm,
Ark of the Covenant is overshadowed, and that's when God's presence begins to dwell in it. And Mary, the Ark of the New Covenant, in Matthew and Luke's gospel, it says that the Holy Spirit overshadows her. It's the same Greek word, right? The Holy
mm,
Spirit overshadows, and then God's presence begins to be in the ark of the old and the new covenant. So it's
mm,
quite obvious. It's beyond possibility that this is a
mhm,
coincidence. There are 5 or 6
mhm,
points. I think I'm leaving one or two out. I'm just going off the top of my head here, but there are 5 or 6 points where Luke is obviously alluding to the fact that Mary is the ark of the new covenant. Okay,
mhm,
once you've accepted that, you can then ask the question, well, where is this ark of the new covenant. And Revelation chapter 11 at the end and chapter 12 at the beginning, it tells us the ark of the new covenant is in heaven, right? The ark of the new covenant is in heaven. So there's no Bible verse that says, and then Mary was assumed into heaven, right? It doesn't work
Hmm.
like that. But
Yeah.
there are Bible verses, and this is just one instance. I could go into several others if you'd like, but this is just one instance where the Bible is clearly alluding to us the fact that Mary is in heaven. And then you look at what the
Hmm.
early church taught about this. You can look at Venerable Bede, you can look at St. John Damascene, St. Maximus the Confessor, and they all are open to the idea, right? They all indicate that Mary's body did not die a natural death and get put in the grave,
Hmm.
right? That they're all very
Yeah.
clear about that. So while there are tombs for the Blessed Virgin Mary, there are no relics for the Blessed Virgin Mary. So you can go and you can see the place of Mary's tomb, which indicates that she did die just like her son, which is the oldest tradition, that she did indeed suffer death. Her soul was separated from her body, but you won't find any relics of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and you won't find any stories of relics of the Blessed Virgin Mary. If anybody knows anything about the early church,
Hmm.
the bones of the saints, more precious than gold, right?
Yeah.
The reason that Rome is considered the first and most important see in the early church is because the bones of Peter are there, and because the
Hmm.
bones of Paul are there, right? The bones of
Yeah.
these saints are I mean, more valuable than kingdoms, than mountains of gold
Hmm.
to these early Christians. They really, really venerate the bodies of the saints. And
Yeah.
nobody talks about the body of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Nobody. That's a really, really strange thing if Mary's relics were well known, if her tomb was well known and her body was in the tomb. It's a very strange thing. So you
Yeah.
start explaining from the scriptures, and you explain how not everything needs to be voiced explicitly in order to be taught by the scriptures. Obviously, the Trinity, right? The
Yeah.
procession of the Holy Ghost from the Son. Those words in that way are not exactly used in the Bible, although you can draw from the Bible that concept. Same thing for
Yeah.
the Assumption. Those words in that way are not used in the Bible, but you can draw from the Bible the conclusion that Mary was assumed into heaven. And then you look to the church fathers to confirm that, and lo and behold, they do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would just be a couple of things to understand about the Assumption
Yeah.
of Mary.
Yeah. That's great. It is interesting what you're saying. Like the words, like, and then Mary was assumed into heaven or whatever. Like, yeah, it's not explicitly in there, but there's so much that's showing us that she was. But what do we do for people that are very, like, let's say it's a Protestant? I feel like you'd maybe run into this more from like an atheist of like wouldn't accept something unless it was explicitly in there. Is that just past your, like, if they're putting a wall up that much, is that just kind of like out of your hands at that point? Not necessarily saying to give up, throw in the towel, and just be like, okay, you're doomed. But like, what, like, is there a different direction to go? Like, if you're having a conversation with somebody and they're just like, I don't know, that seems pretty far fetched. Like her body could have been stolen. So no, that's what
Mhm.
people say about Jesus' resurrection. Alex O'Connor actually brings it up to Trent Horn, saying that his body, like the gardener, could have taken his body. And Trent Horn asks, like, why would he do that? It's like it's actually very common in those days that they would take, especially if someone who, if they believed was the Lord, maybe they would have wanted the body for themselves. I don't know, but some people just aren't willing to accept anything unless it's explicitly in there.
Yeah.
What would be a good kind of response to somebody like that?
This goes back to prayer, but it's important to keep in
Hmm.
mind that the articles of the faith do not admit of proof in the same way that natural sciences do. So, for
Hmm.
example, stupid example here, stupid easy one, I can definitively prove to anybody who has the use of their rational faculties that 2 plus 2 equals 4. I can just prove that. And you really can't argue against it. Otherwise, you're insane or else
Hmm.
lying. That's just the way
Yeah.
that it is. The faith is not like that. The faith is not like that. What has to happen in order for somebody to believe that the faith is true, and St. Augustine and St. Thomas make this very clear, and they
Hmm.
write about it very beautifully. But to sum up their entire thought of this, St. Augustine says, men can do many things against their will, but they cannot believe against their will. Right? So
Hmm.
what does that mean? It means that I can show you the reasonability of the Catholic faith, of the
Hmm.
resurrection or the Assumption of Mary. I can show you the reasonability. I can show you the evidence. I can show you the miracles that validate the claims that I am making. I can show you all of that, and I can walk you through step by step by step. But men will not believe unless they want to believe. Men can
Mm-hmm.
do many things against their will, but no man believes against his will. So, in
Yeah.
order for you to choose to believe, right, this is why faith is a virtue in a different way than just knowledge of mathematics would be a virtue. Your faith is something that you have to actively choose. It is truly faith. The articles of the faith, I believe in God the Father Almighty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are not things that you can prove by human reason alone. They're things
Mm-hmm.
that you can only prove once you've accepted the authority of God to reveal these things. So whenever you're dealing with somebody that's just got a brick wall up and they just won't, that's where you really need to turn to prayer and really
Yeah.
need to try to make your life an authentic witness of what Christianity ought to look like. Which means what? If they're being difficult, you remain patient and
Yeah.
charitable. If they're interrupting you and not letting you get your point out, you do not return the favor. Right? All
Yeah.
these simple things where you have to let your life be a beautiful testimony of the faith so they have an opportunity to have their hearts be moved, right? Because no
Yeah.
man believes against their will.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's another thing, Mitch. Like to bring it back up again, but the George Janko and Alex Voice of Reason. I wouldn't say debate because Alex said he would never debate him, but he would have a conversation with him. But the conversation is both of them did such a great job. Let's give it kudos to both sides. Just that of mutual respect, like of saying like let me like I think Alex at one point is like, hey, let me finish this thought and then I want to hear like what you have to say. And they both do such a good job of like communicating and doing well. And a lot of this too, these questions are kind of coming from me playing devil's advocate because I know another thing I had read is that and it didn't necessarily prove the assumption, but as far as like Mary and her role and how beloved she is and blessed she is using some of the like the miracles that we've seen through her. Our Lady of Guadalupe being a great one. Fatima probably being one of the biggest ones because it's like what is it, 70,000 people
Yeah.
like are eyewitness looking, saying we saw the sun dance, like it danced around as these three girls prayed, and it's just wild to see that kind of stuff and to still question it. I don't know, and maybe they aren't seeing it and then questioning it, but that would be my thought is like if someone was to hear and read this story, um, Saint Juan Diego's story, and then the Our Lady of Guadalupe image appearing and stuff like that. Like, how do you hear this stuff and then still think that Mary was just another one of us?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a better question would be how could the Jews witness the resurrection of Christ and still reject him?
Yeah,
It's like
man.
it just goes back to this principle is your heart has to be open and it has to be by an act of God's grace. It's not something
Yeah,
that I can teach. It's not something that I can lecture on. It's nothing like that. If anybody's watched my channel and been benefited by it spiritually, it's the act of the Holy Ghost in spite of me, not because of me, right?
mm-hmm.
That's the way that it works. And so, whenever you're dealing with somebody who really has that hardness of heart, right? It's important to not open up the articles of the faith to ridicule as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus himself says in Matthew chapter 6, I believe, he says, do not cast your pearls before swine. What does that mean? Well, it means that the pearls, the valuable, the good, the beautiful, the holy things of the faith require faith. For the most obvious example, the Eucharist. I will never have a conversation about the Eucharist with an atheist. It's just not
Mm-hmm.
worth it. It's
Yeah,
just, if you don't accept premise A, premise B, premise C, premise D, right? If you don't accept all these things that are preambles to the faith, even, then you're
yeah,
never going to accept the highest article of our Catholic faith. So if they want to
yeah,
talk about that, I would back the conversation up. I'd be like, hold on, wait a second. So you don't believe in God, right? I'd back it up to where the common ground is, and then try to
mm-hmm.
work from there. Trying to
Yeah,
defend the atheist trying to defend the Eucharist to an atheist is a fruitless endeavor. Even if you do
yeah,
everything perfectly, it doesn't matter. Do not cast your pearls before swine. So
yeah,
that would be another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes it's best to keep your tongue and keep your peace and just
mm-hmm.
pray for them silently,
Yeah,
right? Sometimes your silent witness and suffering is more valuable than many words.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I would say that one of the biggest things I ever heard, or the best things I've ever heard about evangelization is that it's built out of relationship, and as soon as you lose that, you lose everything. You lose that whole credibility. They're not going to trust you at all, and that you should genuinely befriend this person. And this means being friends with atheists and being friends with your Protestant brothers and sisters, and loving on them where they're at. At the same time, it's kind of like with atheists, we go and we live with them, or live uh, in the world, but not of the world, and like of their world. And just as Jesus ate with prostitutes and tax collectors and sinners, but it all starts with the relationship. And then the second part of it, and I think this was actually Carlo in the episode we did together, but he was saying that, and then also remember 99.999% of the time you are not going to convert them that day. And so this will be an ongoing conversation, and it should be left off just like George Danko and Alex left off. Of like, they did not convert either way. They just like, this was great. This was an awesome conversation. So glad. I'm so excited to continue this and continue to have this relationship and learn and grow together. And I think as soon as we lose that, people start building up those walls. Because as soon as you get attacking, as soon as you start demeaning people, calling names, telling people they're going to hell, even though we have no power to say that, that's when everyone starts building up those walls, and that you've lost all the respect. You don't have that relationship, and nothing's going to happen. No good's going to come out of this now.
Yeah, it's really important to be right and not be proud about the fact that you're right. I think
Mm-hmm.
Scott Hahn said this once, but he said, God resists the proud, especially when they're right.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that if you do have the correct faith and you really believe that you have that, that you are gifted with a tremendous burden, and you now must
Mm-hmm.
present that faith well in a way that
Yeah.
doesn't turn people away from the faith, that doesn't turn them off, or your vices are now what they think Christianity is. And it's a
Yeah.
tremendous burden. It's something that nobody does perfectly in this life, but it's just something to be aware that that is there. And whenever you have these conversations with people, you need to be as humble and as respectful and as charitable as
Mm-hmm.
possible, right? Because at the end
Yeah.
of the day, winning souls is different than winning arguments.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think we came to or Carlo had thrown out there's a difference in his world, especially as an apologist, is like of winning an argument for your glory, or winning your argument for, or not your glory, for your sake, or winning the argument for their sake. And so
Right.
there's such a, you can always kind of tell too, in the way people approach someone and the way they talk and the way they present themselves, is like, this person's arguing solely to look good, to win the conversation, to like put the person down, like, you're wrong, I'm right, this is why. When it comes to evangelization, like, you see that in politics obviously all the time, but when it comes to evangelization, it's got to be the opposite of you coming down to them, meeting them where they're at. So I want to walk with you, and I've heard the Socratic approach, I think is what they call it, what is such a beautiful thing to remember. Is, and you mentioned it a few times, just that asking questions is finding out what they believe, because the more we, or the less we know about what they believe, the more we're going to possibly go down a path where they might be like, yeah, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying there, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this, and you've kind of either wasted your breath, you've maybe losing credibility, because they're like thinking you're not listening to me, like you're listening to respond, or you're not truly listening to what I believe. And it also reminded me of what Bishop Condola, our bishop here in Tulsa, he said at this engaged encounter weekend we were presenting at, and he said, if you guys want to avoid arguing, or to go into arguments better, you want to avoid the inference ladder. And I had no clue what it was, and he explained it, and it was really really beautiful. He's like, the inference ladder is when you jump into an argument and you start saying, like, you believe this, or you said this, and you thought this about me, and whatever. And you start climbing this ladder, and the more you say, and the more you let it go on, you climb this ladder of, like, she told me I didn't do the dishes last night. And because then you take the next step, and it's like, man, when she said that, she kind of said it with a tone. I think she's mad at me. I think that, man, she must be really like upset that I wouldn't play poker with my friends, even though she told me I could. I don't know why. She's so, and you're climbing this ladder. You're just, it's stacking it on and stacking it on. But then when you come down, she's like, oh, I was just reminding you to do the dishes. And it's just like, you climb this inference ladder, and you're talking down at them because you're like, you think this is what they're thinking, but then they're over here like, listen, that's not even what I thought. And then it gets really really bad when both parties start climbing the inference ladder, because
Yeah.
then it's like, you're both just going to climb. You're going to keep trying to climb higher and higher than the other person, uh, yeah, so I probably said that. Sorry, Bishop Condo, if I butchered that. I probably said that way worse than you did, and I did say it worse than you did. But yeah, it's this beautiful kind of analogy that's great for marriages, but I think it also relates in this Protestant versus Catholicism or atheist versus Catholicism conversations that happen.
Yeah, and it's important to keep in mind that in order for you not to sin, you have a moral obligation to assume the best of the other party to the degree
Yeah,
that it's reasonable, right? And
yeah,
this is just seen in people who are magnetic, people who have charming personalities and who seem to win everybody over. They're speaking well about people behind their backs. They're trying
mm-hmm,
to excuse their faults as much as possible and trying to draw attention away from them, trying to focus
mm-hmm,
on their good qualities. And so
yeah,
it's important to keep in mind that if you go into an argument and you assume the worst and you're wrong, you've just damaged that person's reputation, at least in
mm-hmm,
your own mind. If you
yeah,
go into an argument and you assume the best and you're wrong, nobody was harmed, right? And you
mm-hmm,
need, file that away. Know better
yeah,
next time. Don't be an idiot. Don't be imprudent. But
yeah,
nobody was harmed if you're assuming the best. And obviously, there's situations, there's prudence, there's all these things, right? If somebody has
mm-hmm,
a history of something, you don't just forget that entirely and let your teenage daughter go out with them or whatever, right? There's
yeah, yeah,
obviously prudence involved, but you are morally obligated to the degree that it's reasonable to
mm-hmm,
assume that the other party is a generally good guy, that they're a good person. And that's
yeah,
in order for you not to sin, you have to do that.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I hope conversations like the one George Shenko and Alex had um, inspire others to like talk like that. And George specifically addressed it to the camera. Any Catholics out there that are like bashing on your Protestants, like I want to just take this moment to say right now, like put your arms down. Like that's we shouldn't be like that. Like you shouldn't be attacking others for this. And it was just such a beautiful witness to others. And I love that Alex felt um, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it seemed like he felt almost like I have a platform and I'm on an even bigger platform, George Shanko's podcast. This would be the perfect time for me to stand up for what's right, like me to say something that could change a bunch of people because I think a lot of people could be going down that path that you exactly what you just said of like talking bad about others and damaging people's image when especially, I mean, George's image was damaged by some of the things people said, but damaging their image and then just kind of leading down that path of like a really, really dicey path where yeah, you could fall into sin in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, yeah, it's really important, and especially, you see it sometimes even in the Catholic sphere where people will, one Catholic person will take a shot at another Catholic person, and
Mhm.
when I see them, I'm just like, that's not it.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
look, I'm not perfect. Unless I'm missing something, you're not perfect either, right? Like
Hmm.
we're making
No.
mistakes. We're doing our best, and I think
Yeah.
that as long as somebody's living in the folds of Mother Church and not
Hmm.
outstepping those bounds, not openly embracing heresy or openly rejecting some of her moral teachings,
Hmm.
I think people need to be brought together, especially within the church, and that unity that we have is the cause of Protestants wanting to be a part of it. I think a large degree, right? I've
Yeah.
talked to lots of Protestants who converted, and they said that they wanted the unity under the Pope. They wanted the unity in the liturgy. They wanted the unity in prayer and in doctrine. They
Hmm.
wanted that unity. And so we
Yeah.
really need to be, as Catholic people with some sort of a platform, we really need to be intentional about trying to promote unity and not
Yeah.
disunity, right? Because if we want to
Yeah.
convert people, we got to have something to bring them into, and it's got to be something awesome. It's got to be something
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And no better place that needs to be kind of pitched unity than social media. I mean, social media
Mm-hmm.
is probably the biggest area of mission that needs that message because it's like the most uh, it would the word be disunified places out there. And I know I got to talk with Trent Horn for a little bit, and he had encouraged me to keep going. Like, hey, I'm glad the channel's doing well. Like, keep going. Uh, we need content creators online because we
Yeah.
need people that are out there spreading a good message and putting joy on the internet, which our patron saint for this podcast is Saint Philip Neri, and he's the patron saint of joy. Actually wanted to experience God's joy and invited that in the and this fireball comes down from heaven, and his heart was enlarged so much that it broke ribs, and he had this deformity, and it was like this crazy experience. And he actually told God to take it away because he couldn't take how much joy he was feeling. So it's just super cool to have this patron saint and have this message of like we want to spread joy on this thing. Like that's why people if we ever do a reaction video, like I did some reaction videos to some Alex O'Connor stuff, Atheist, big platform. I love the way his mind thinks. I think it's a beautiful, some of the things he thinks, some of the ways, obviously, we disagree on a lot. But you'll never find a video on here where I'm just like, all right, guys, it's time to talk about this. Like, this is, we're going to bash this person today. Because that's just not, it's not going to be fruitful for anybody.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the difficult part though, is because the baser part of people really wants that emotional reaction, and
Yeah.
so it'll get a lot of views. You know,
Hmm.
you go in and start bashing people, and
Yeah.
that's the pitfall that some people fall into, I think.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's really just important to be mindful about that and to remember what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 12, that men will be judged for every idle word. He says, by your words you shall be justified, and by your words you shall be condemned. And those are chilling words.
Yeah.
Those are some of the scariest words in the entire gospel, I think. Matthew chapter 12, if anyone wants to look it up and read that.
Hmm.
But it's really important to use our words to build people up, to encourage, to
Hmm.
strengthen whenever possible. Obviously, there are times for correction.
Yeah.
It's almost never the case that the comment section of a YouTube video or the comment section on an X post or
Yeah.
whatever, it's almost never the case. I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that that's the proper place for fraternal correction.
Yeah.
I would be very open if I said something in a video that was wrong or something like that. You know, you can DM me. I respond to almost all of them on
Hmm.
Instagram and an X. I get a lot of them, but do my best to try to give everybody at least one response. And
Yeah.
if it's done in that way and it's done in a way that's charitable, I am very open to being corrected. Right. I
Yeah.
am incredibly open. Or if a friend who I've met in person says, hey, man, I think you went too far here, or actually this was incorrect, you should go back. I'm very, very, I've done it before where I've made posts and I've said, hey, I made this mistake. I am sorry. I'll try to do better in the future. Like I'm not stubborn at all when it comes to
Yeah.
that. But whenever
Hmm.
people come out and they want to publicly get you or something like
Yeah.
that,
Hmm.
it's just I'm automatically, I'm a human being, right? Automatically my defenses are put up and you're just creating an us versus them mentality rather
Yeah.
than in humility saying, brother, I think you made a mistake here. Let's try to deal with this privately and then moving
Hmm.
forward. So yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the same for friend groups, right? We're talking about social media now. It's the same for
Yeah.
friend groups. It's the same for families. Try to handle
Hmm.
things individually. Try to preserve that person's reputation as much as you can before you
Hmm.
make it into a public matter. I think that's just good advice for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we're going a little bit over on time, so sorry to take much of your time. I wanted to just to close it out, just give you a chance. Like, where can people find like more of your videos and stuff, and check you out?
Yeah, if you want to see more of my videos, you can check out my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Cameron Riker.
And
That's
we'll
what
put it
it
in the
is.
description as well.
Yeah, I do apologetics. I do some dating video. I do basically anything that would interest young Catholic men. That's
Mhm. Yeah.
that's kind of what
Nice.
my channel is and what it's
Hmm.
for. So you can check me out there. Before all else, though, I just ask everyone who's watching maybe to just say a quick prayer for me after this video.
Hmm.
I'd really appreciate that. I think that's going to be the most fruitful thing anybody can do for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think what Saint Jose Maria Escriva's prayer is the foundation of the spiritual edifice. I think that's the phrase. I'll quote the actual quote in the in the description if that's wrong. But yeah, no, I say the same thing all the time. It's like I I want people to support the channel. You guys can join our Patreon. You can join it for free. We do a bunch of gospel reflection stuff like that. But I tell people all the time, I was like, you know what? The best thing you can do is just pray for the channel. Like, pray for the channel, pray for me as a person. That like I always steward it well. But that's the number one thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And as a development director, I mean, sending out big appeal letters that we need to bring in so much money so we can continue the mission. It's always like ways to support. Number one, pray for the mission. It's always the
Yeah.
number one thing because if I have 100 people praying for the mission, the other 100 that are going to donate the money that are going to get us to our goal, they'll come. God will take care of it, or the project won't cost as much as we thought, or whatever it is. Like, it'll be taken care of. But that prayer part is the most important part. So, well, we'll definitely be praying for you and everything you're doing, and I think we could have easily done like a 3-hour Pints with Aquinas episode. So I definitely love to have you back on sometime. Maybe after Lent, and we can have like an actual like glass of whiskey or a beer or something together. But yeah, thanks again for joining. Everyone, again, don't forget to subscribe, like the video. If you guys want to see more, you guys want to check out next week's episode, don't forget to hit the alert bell to be alerted when we upload new videos. We also got this week, Tell Me About It, Tara, another playlist that comes out on our series. And Tara's going to be talking about, can introverts evangelize, and how should you evangelize. So if you're an introvert, check out that video coming out soon. But other than that, you guys have a great week, and we will see you guys next week. God bless.
God bless you.